Another day, another story. A captain and his crew needlessly endangered the lives of those on board.
Welcome to Tabo Eminent Channel.
Many famous naval disasters happened far out at sea, but on January 13, 2012, the Costa Concordia wrecked just off the coast of an Italian island in relatively shallow water. The avoidable disaster killed 32 people and seriously injured many others, and left investigators wondering, why was the luxury cruise ship sailing so close to the shore in the first place? During the ensuing trial, prosecutors came up with a tabloid-ready explanation. The married ship captain had sailed it so close to the island to impress a much younger Moldovan dancer with whom he was having an affair. The Costa Concordia disaster, which occurred on January 13, 2012, off the coast of Giglio Island in Italy, was a tragic maritime accident that resulted in the loss of 32 lives. While the primary cause of the disaster was the ship striking a reef and subsequently capsizing, human errors played a significant role in making the situation worse. Here are some key aspects of how human error exacerbated the Costa Concordia disaster. Navigational error. The initial cause of the accident was a navigational error. The ship's captain, Francesco Schettino, deviated from the approved course to perform a sail-past salute to the island, coming dangerously close to the shore. This was done without proper authorization and without taking into account the known underwater hazards in the area. Schettino's decision to navigate the ship too close to the island was a significant human error that directly led to the collision with the reef. Delayed evacuation. After the collision, the crew failed to promptly initiate an evacuation of the ship. This delay allowed the situation to worsen as the vessel began to list and take on water. Evacuation procedures should have been immediately initiated to ensure the safety of passengers and crew. Lack of training. Some crew members were ill-prepared to handle the emergency situation. There were reports of crew members who did not speak fluent English, the ship's primary language for communication with passengers. This language barrier hindered effective communication during the evacuation, causing confusion and panic among passengers. Poor communication. There was a lack of clear communication between the captain and the crew during the early stages of the emergency. Schettino left the ship before all passengers had been evacuated and failed to provide accurate information to the Coast Guard and authorities about the situation on board. This miscommunication hindered the coordination of rescue efforts. Inadequate safety drills. It was reported that some passengers were not familiar with the ship's emergency procedures, as safety drills had not been conducted properly or regularly. This lack of preparedness among passengers further exacerbated the chaotic evacuation. Crew abandonment. Captain Schettino's decision to abandon the ship before all passengers were evacuated was widely criticized. Maritime law dictates that a ship's captain is responsible for the safety of everyone on board and should be among the last to leave the vessel in an emergency. Delayed response. Italian authorities were criticized for their response time in coordinating rescue efforts. The delay in requesting assistance and mobilizing resources may have contributed to the loss of lives. In summary, the Costa Concordia disaster was a tragic event in which multiple human errors, from the initial navigational mistake to the delayed evacuation and inadequate crew training, made the situation worse and resulted in the loss of lives. The disaster served as a stark reminder of the importance of adherence to safety protocols, proper training, and effective communication in maritime operations. Captain Francesco Schettino faced legal consequences for his actions, including charges of manslaughter and abandoning ship, and was sentenced to prison. Whether or not Captain Francesco Schettino was trying to impress his girlfriend is debatable. Schettino insisted the ship sailed close to shore to salute other mariners and give passengers a good view. But whatever the reason for getting too close, the Italian courts found the captain, 4 crew members and 1 official from the ship's company, Costa Concordia, part of Carnival Corporation, to be at fault for causing the disaster and preventing a safe evacuation. The wreck was not the fault of unexpected weather or ship malfunction. It was a disaster caused entirely by a series of human errors. At any time when you have an incident similar to Concordia, there is never a single causal factor, says Brad Schoenwald, a senior marine inspector at the United States Coast Guard. It is generally a sequence of events, things that line up in a bad way that ultimately create that incident. Wrecking near the shore. The Concordia was supposed to take passengers on a 7-day Italian cruise from Civitavecchia to Savona. But when it deviated from its planned path to sail closer to the island of Giglio, the ship struck a reef known as the Skull Rocks. The impact damaged the ship, allowing water to seep in and putting the 4,229 people on board in danger. Sailing close to shore to give passengers a nice view or salute other sailors is known as a sail-by, and it's unclear how often cruise ships perform these maneuvers. Some consider them to be dangerous deviations from planned routes. In its investigative report on the 2012 disaster, Italy's Ministry of Infrastructures and Transports found that the Concordia was sailing too close to the coastline, in a poorly lit shore area, at an unsafe distance at nighttime and at high speed, 15.5 knots. In his trial, Captain Schettino blamed the shipwreck on helmsman Jacob Russley-Bin, who he claimed reacted incorrectly to his order, and argued that if the helmsman had reacted correctly and quickly, the ship wouldn't have wrecked. However, an Italian naval admiral testified in court that even though the helmsman was late in executing the captain's orders, the crash would have happened anyway. The helmsman was one of the 4 crew members convicted in court for contributing to the disaster. A questionable evacuation. Evidence introduced in Schettino's trial suggests that the safety of his passengers and crew wasn't his #1 priority as he assessed the damage to the Concordia. The impact and water leakage caused an electrical blackout on the ship, and a recorded phone call with Costa Concordia's crisis coordinator, Roberto Ferrarini, shows he tried to downplay and cover up his actions by saying the blackout was what actually caused the accident. "I have made a mess and practically the whole ship is flooding," Schettino told Ferrarini while the ship was sinking. "What should I say to the media? To the port authorities I have said that we had a blackout." Ferrarini was later convicted for contributing to the disaster by delaying rescue operations. Schettino also didn't immediately alert the Italian Search and Rescue Authority about the accident. The impact on the Skull Rocks occurred at about 9:45 p.m. local time, and the first person to contact rescue officials about the ship was someone on the shore, according to the investigative report. Search and Rescue contacted the ship a few minutes after 10 p.m., but Schettino didn't tell them what had happened for about 20 more minutes. A little more than an hour after impact, the crew began to evacuate the ship. But the report noted that some passengers testified that they didn't hear the alarm to proceed to the lifeboats. Evacuation was made even more chaotic by the ship listing so far to starboard, making walking inside very difficult and lowering the lifeboats on one side, near to impossible. Making things worse, the crew had dropped the anchor incorrectly, causing the ship to flop over even more dramatically. Through the confusion, the captain somehow made it into a lifeboat before everyone else had made it off. A Coast Guard member angrily told him on the phone to get back on board. Damn it. A recorded soundbite that turned into a t-shirt slogan in Italy. Schettino argued that he fell into a lifeboat because of how the ship was listing to one side, but this argument proved unconvincing. In 2015, a court found Schettino guilty of manslaughter, causing a shipwreck, abandoning ship before passengers and crew were evacuated and lying to authorities about the disaster. He was sentenced to 16 years in prison. In addition to Schettino, Ferrarini and Russley-Bin, the other people who received convictions for their role in the disaster were Cabin Service Director Manrico Giampedroni, First Officer Ciro Ambrosio and Third Officer Silvia Coronica. The heroic actions of crew members and passengers. Amidst the chaos and human errors that exacerbated the Costa Concordia disaster, there were stories of incredible bravery and heroism displayed by both crew members and passengers. These individuals defied the odds and risked their lives to save others. Crew sacrifices. While some crew members were criticized for their actions during the disaster, others demonstrated remarkable courage and selflessness. They stayed behind to help passengers evacuate, even as the ship was listing dangerously. These crew members often worked in challenging conditions, guiding frightened passengers to safety and ensuring they had life jackets. Passenger resilience. Many passengers aboard the Costa Concordia showed remarkable resilience and helped one another during the evacuation. They provided support to the elderly and disabled, comforted terrified children, and assisted in the chaotic evacuation process. Some passengers also acted as impromptu interpreters to bridge the language barrier between crew members and passengers. Strangers becoming lifesavers. In the face of disaster, complete strangers formed impromptu teams to assist in the evacuation. Passengers and crew members who had never met before worked together to lower lifeboats, create human chains to help people down steeply inclined decks, and provide emotional support to those in distress. Acts of courage. There were individual acts of bravery as well. Passengers who couldn't swim risked jumping into the cold water to reach lifeboats, while others helped to rescue those who were struggling in the water. These acts of courage saved lives. Survivor stories. The first-hand accounts of survivors who owe their lives to the bravery and assistance of others would be central to this story. They could share their experiences of the disaster, detailing the moments when they felt hope and humanity in the midst of the crisis. This additional story angle would focus on the resilience and compassion displayed by people in the face of a catastrophic event. It would emphasize the heroism of those who worked tirelessly to ensure the safety of their fellow passengers and provide a more. Thanks for watching. Request you to subscribe the channel.